Sometimes, the only way to get past a massive mental block or a really toxic situation isn't to go around it. It's to just bite right through it.
Yeah, which sounds incredibly intense, right? Maybe even a bit aggressive on the surface. But when you actually look at the mechanics of it, applying direct calibrated force is actually one of the most practical strategies we have for navigating roadblocks.
Welcome to the deep dive. And, if this idea of biting through resistance sounds like exactly the kind of strategy you need in your life right now, you are in the right place.
Absolutely.
Today's framework actually comes straight from the ancient wisdom explored by the creators of the mind key to the I Ching. And before we really jump in, you can actually explore the entire system yourself, because their companion app, Kas, is live and available to download on the Apple App Store.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and the physical book version of the Mind Key to the I Ching is officially on the shelves at Amazon Books right now. It's just this incredible toolkit for understanding these hidden psychological dynamics.
It really is. And, exploring these frameworks always reveals how little human nature has actually changed. I mean, the strategies for dealing with an impossible neighbor or, say, a failing business project today, they're the exact same strategies used thousands of years ago.
Which brings us to our mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking the ancient concept of Shi Ke, which translates to biting through.
Right.
The fundamental goal here is to figure out how to chew through the tough obstacles in your life. Because we all have them sitting there on our plates, right?
Oh, definitely.
Maybe it's a terrible habit you can't shake, a difficult project that is completely stalled out, or even a personal boundary someone just keeps crossing. We want to figure out how to crush that obstacle without, metaphorically speaking, breaking our own teeth in the process.
Yeah. And to understand the mechanics of how to do that, we have to look at the visual architecture of this concept. It's constructed from two distinct elements acting together.
Okay.
The top element is fire, and the bottom element is thunder.
Fire and thunder. I mean, I know that sounds like the name of an 80s rock band.
Yeah, a little bit.
But let's ground this for a second. How does combining fire and thunder actually help someone deal with, like, a nightmare inbox or a really difficult conversation?
Well, think of it less as a weather event and much more as a mechanical device. So the top element, fire, it represents pure, unclouded awareness.
Okay, so just seeing things clearly.
Exactly. Imagine a bright, high-intensity surgical light suspended directly over an operating table. It exposes the problem with absolute, unforgiving clarity.
No shadows.
Right. No shadows, no gray areas, and absolutely no place for the issue to hide.
The surgical light of pure awareness.
Yeah.
Like that. That handles the visibility of the problem. And the thunder.
Thunder acts as the engine. It sits at the bottom of the structure and represents this unstoppable, surging internal drive. It's pure kinetic energy.
Like forward momentum.
Yes. And when you lock these two together, the surgical light of awareness on top and the driving force of thunder on the bottom, you create a highly effective mechanism for clamping down on a problem.
Like a jaw.
Exactly like a jaw. You apply sustained pressure to whatever is stuck in the middle until the structural resistance shatters and it clears the pathway.
Okay, so we are talking about a deliberate, highly visible application of force. But before we just start clamping our jaws down on every annoyance in our lives, we have to prepare our mindsets.
Oh, 100%.
Because if you just go around biting down on every single problem with maximum force, you're going to end up exhausted, probably alienated from your peers, and sporting a massive headache.
Yeah, biting through is absolutely not about mindless aggression or throwing a tantrum. To do this without hurting yourself, there are three core mindsets that have to be established first. The first principle is destruction for the sake of flow.
Hold on, let me push back slightly on that word, destruction. Culturally, destruction gets a terrible rap. I mean, we are constantly taught to be constructive, to build things, to find workarounds. Breaking things just feels like a failure of diplomacy.
Culturally, sure, but structurally, you cannot detour around fundamental resistance.
What do you mean?
Think of a massive, stubborn boulder blocking a vital river. Trying to dig an entirely new riverbed around that boulder is going to warp the ecosystem, flood the surrounding banks, and waste massive amounts of energy.
Right. It's just a huge mess.
Exactly. Sometimes clearing the obstacle itself, literally crushing the boulder, is the only viable way to restore order. In this context, clearing the block is the ultimate act of building order.
So it's like you have to re-break a bone that healed incorrectly so you can set it properly. The destruction is a medical necessity.
Precisely. Which brings us to the second mindset, transparent discipline. When you apply this force to break an obstacle, you must use objective rules, not subjective emotions. The environment should feel like a perfectly functioning courtroom, completely stripped of moralizing, personal vendettas, or anger.
Wait, human nature dictates that if you apply rigid discipline, the other party is going to get angry anyway, right? Like, if I set a hard boundary with a micromanaging boss, they're probably going to be furious. How does keeping things objective actually help there?
Well, it doesn't necessarily prevent the other person from reacting poorly initially. What it does is prevent you from absorbing their chaos.
Ah, I see.
Because if you bring anger into the clamping process, you are essentially adding brand new obstacles to the situation. Anger clouds the fire, that surgical light of awareness we talked about. You lose your clarity.
Let's frame this with a relatable Western scenario for everyone listening. Say you are trying to set an app blocker on your phone to stop yourself from doom scrolling at midnight. Or, you are telling that micromanaging boss you simply won't answer emails after dinner. It's not about being furious at yourself or storming into your boss's office in a rage. It's about setting a hard, transparent rule and letting the rule do the heavy lifting.
Exactly.
Like if you email me after 8 p.m., the system auto-replies that I will answer at 9 a.m., you aren't judging them. You're just executing a clear, pre-established boundary.
The rule triggers the consequence, removing your ego from the equation entirely. It is completely objective, and that objectivity allows you to master the third mindset, stress control.
Meaning?
You must constantly calibrate your force to match the specific obstacle.
Oh, this is the don't break your own teeth protocol.
Exactly. If you apply too little force, the blockage remains intact, and you just exhaust yourself grinding against it. Conversely, if you apply maximum force to a very, minor issue, you damage the surrounding structure. You alienate people, you ruin relationships, you crack your teeth. Calibration is everything.
Okay, so we have our three foundational mindsets. Destruction to restore vital flow, clear objective rules without emotion, and calibrating our force to match the resistance.
Right.
Now we move into the actual application. It's the first three stages of action. And from the architecture you described, these first three stages are entirely internal, right?
Yes, they are.
We are dealing with our own psychological defenses and early stage boundaries before we even attempt to tackle external problems.
The mechanism operates from the bottom up. We start in the bottom trigram, the thunder, which represents the self and internal drive. Stage 1, or line 1, is known as the initial stop.
What's the imagery for that?
The imagery the text uses here is socks covering the toes.
Socks covering the toes. My immediate deduction here is that this is about, low-cost preventative maintenance. You aren't in a full-body prison. Just your toes are pinched to stop you from taking a step.
That's spot on. It is an immediate physical blocking of a minor boundary crossing. The exact moment a bad idea or a toxic impulse pops up, your internal rule slaps it down lightly but firmly.
Just a quick pinch.
Right, it covers the toes, completely arresting your forward momentum before you can walk into a larger catastrophe.
It's the psychology of microboundaries. Let's say a colleague makes a slightly passive-aggressive joke in a meeting. If you ignore it, if you don't stub the toe, so to speak, it eventually grows into a deeply toxic dynamic.
Exactly.
But if you immediately calmly say, "What did you mean by that?" You apply just enough pressure to stop the momentum without blowing up the room.
Catching the error at the toe level saves the entire system. You accept a tiny fraction of discomfort to prevent a massive structural failure later. But, life isn't always caught at step 1.
Unfortunately not.
When a problem has a bit more form to it, you move to line 2, the smooth cut.
And the imagery for line 2.
It's biting soft meat covering the nose.
Covering the nose. That implies you are biting so deeply into something that you face zero resistance. Your whole face just sinks completely into it.
Yeah, pretty vivid, right?
Are we talking about a psychological blind spot where we expect a massive fight but get none?
You are describing the exact sensation of line 2. This occurs when you encounter a low-resistance obstacle that you perhaps built up in your head. Imagine a relatively obvious bad habit that you finally decide to cut out.
Okay.
You prepare for a grueling battle, but surprisingly, you face very little internal pushback.
It's like dreading a conversation with a friend about skipping their expensive destination wedding, and when you finally tell them, they just say, "Oh, thank goodness, I was hoping for a smaller head count anyway."
Right. Because the structural resistance is practically zero, your force slices through it smoothly and deeply. You don't just trim the edges of the problem. You plunge all the way in covering the nose, leaving no residue behind. It is a clean, total removal of a soft obstacle.
Deleting an app you didn't really enjoy anyway is easy. But what about the stuff that is tied to our actual identity? The deep, stubborn vices, or the decades-old family drama? The smooth cut isn't going to work there.
No, it definitely won't.
How does this mechanism handle a problem that actively fights back?
When the resistance hardens, we arrive at line 3, which is the most difficult internal stage. We call it the messy metal. The vivid imagery here is biting old dried meat, encountering poison.
Old dried meat and poison. Wow. That implies we are no longer dealing with a fresh problem. This is something that has been sitting in the sun, hardening, festering.
Exactly. At this stage, you lack the overwhelming, sharp force required for a clean cut. You are essentially using a dull blade on a tough, deeply ingrained problem.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. Because the process gets stuck, you are forced to just sit there grinding away at it. And this immense friction causes buried toxins to leak out into the open.
The psychological mechanism here is just fascinating. This sounds exactly like trying to process an old childhood trauma in therapy. Or, finally sitting down to fire that toxic employee who has been dragging down the department for 5 years.
Oh, perfect example.
It is never a clean break. It is incredibly messy. There's immense drama. People are upset, and all the relational poison leaks out into the office.
Yeah, and let's take that toxic employee analogy a step further to really understand the poison. The poison isn't just them complaining or threatening a lawsuit. The poison is also your own sudden realization that your conflict-avoidant management style allowed them to stay this long.
Oof. Yeah, that stings.
The toxicity leaks out of the obstacle, but it also leaks out of you. This collateral stress is why people usually quit at this exact stage. They do not want to taste the poison.
Well, let me challenge the instinct to quit there. If the poison is leaking everywhere and morale is plummeting, conventional wisdom says, hey, you made a mistake. You pushed too hard. Shouldn't you back off and reassess?
Withdrawing your effort at that moment is the most dangerous thing you can do. The crucial takeaway of line 3 is that the toxic leakage is not a failure of the process. It is a mandatory part of the detox.
A mandatory part of the detox.
Yes, when you tackle deep-seated, complex issues with limited force, the cut will invariably be jagged. You simply have to endure the backlash, maintain the objective pressure, and let the toxins fully dissipate until the structural resistance finally snaps.
Because if you stop chewing on the poisoned meat halfway through, you just leave an open, infected wound.
Exactly that. You must stay the course.
Okay, so we've navigated the internal friction, the toes, the smooth cuts, and the toxic, messy metal. Now the framework transitions from our internal struggles out into the external environment. We are moving up into the top trigram, the fire.
Right. We are shifting from the driving kinetic force of thunder into the pure surgical awareness of fire. Out here in the external world, the obstacles are institutional.
So they're tougher.
Much tougher. But our methods must become sharper, more sophisticated, and relentlessly objective.
Which brings us to line 4, known as the middle arrow. The imagery escalates again here. Biting dried meat on the bone, finding a metal arrow.
Yeah.
We've gone from soft meat to old meat to meat on the bone. My deduction here is that hitting bone means we've encountered a core structural defense that cannot simply be chewed through, no matter how much force we apply.
You're right. Hitting the bone represents a high-pressure standoff. This is an institutional roadblock, a deeply entrenched legal battle, or a fundamental flaw in a system's architecture. You cannot easily crush it. The struggle becomes prolonged and intense.
But the text says you find a metal arrow inside the meat. A metal arrow is man-made, it's forged, it's a tool. How does enduring a standoff result in finding a tool?
Through the intense friction of the standoff, you are forced to strip away all subjective emotions, biases, and soft arguments.
Because they just don't work against the bone.
Right. The pressure burns away everything that isn't structurally sound, and what remains, what you extract from the core of the conflict, is an undeniable objective truth, a foundational law. That undeniable rule is the metal arrow.
Okay, let's apply this. Imagine you are leading a massive corporate project, and one specific department absolutely refuses to cooperate. They stonewall you for months.
A classic standoff.
Right. It is a brutal, bone-crunching standoff. But because you were forced to endure that friction, you map out exactly where the entire company workflow is broken. From that conflict, you establish a brand new, ironclad, non-negotiable company policy.
Yes.
You didn't just survive the obstacle. You forged a structural rule, a metal arrow that ensures this specific blockage can never happen again.
You extract a permanent systemic upgrade from the resistance itself. It is a highly effective but incredibly exhausting process.
Yeah, I bet. So is there a stage where we don't have to engage in a brutal standoff, a point where the resistance doesn't require grinding against the bone?
There is, and that is the ultimate mastery of this framework, found in line 5, the golden light. The imagery here shifts dramatically. Biting dried meat, finding gold.
Gold instead of an arrow. Gold implies immense value, but also something pure, something that doesn't rust or require forging.
Exactly. At this stage, you are standing directly in the center of the fire position. You are in a position of leadership, operating with absolute unclouded clarity. Because your awareness is so pure, you no longer need brute force or a high-pressure standoff. Instead, you utilize pure transparency.
Let's explore the mechanism of transparency, because it sounds, I don't know, almost too passive. Let's say you have a highly manipulative colleague actively trying to undermine your career.
Okay.
The instinct is to use brute force, right?
Right.
Get in a shouting match, argue in meetings. How does pure transparency solve this without a fight?
Manipulative dynamics, gossip, and toxic behavior rely entirely on asymmetrical information. They need secrecy and deniability to survive. They're like cockroaches. They can only operate in the shadows.
Ah. So instead of fighting them in the shadows, you just turn on the surgical lights.
Right.
You CC every relevant stakeholder on every email. You map out every metric on a public dashboard. You document every workflow transparently without a single ounce of emotion or accusation. You just introduce pure fire.
You remove the fuel that the obstacle requires to exist. The obstacle dissolves on its own in the pure light of awareness. It simply cannot survive in a fully transparent environment.
That makes total sense.
And what you are left with is the gold operations, relationships, and systems that are completely clean, intrinsically valuable, and utterly free of hidden agendas.
It's brilliant because it conserves your energy. You don't throw a single punch. You just illuminate the room and let the architecture of the problem collapse under its own visibility.
It requires immense discipline to remain objective and avoid the emotional mud wrestling, but it is unequivocally the most efficient way to clear a systemic blockage.
Wow. Okay, so we've mapped out how to succeed at every stage, from catching the minor slip-ups early to shining the golden light of transparency on the most entrenched obstacles. But as with all deep dives into these ancient systems, we must address the warning label.
We must.
What happens if an individual or an organization entirely fails to apply this mechanism?
The framework provides a very dark clinical warning in its final stage, line 6. It is the absolute top of the structure, and the imagery creates a chilling bookend to where we started. Instead of stalks covering the toes, the text reads, stalks covering the ears.
Stalks covering the ears. That is deeply claustrophobic. Your head is locked in, and you are entirely deafened. My immediate thought is the echo chamber effect.
It represents a total structural collapse. This happens when you ignore the tiny toe stubs from line 1, you avoid the smooth cuts, you run away from the toxic poison, you let those unaddressed blockages build and build until they overwhelm the top of the system, your head.
Right.
At this point, you have completely sealed off your own feedback loop.
The fire goes out completely. There is no awareness left.
None. You become deaf to correction. You lock yourself in a rigid defensive shell. You can no longer hear what the market, your family, or environment is telling you.
And without feedback.
Because you cannot receive feedback, you cannot adapt. And when a system can no longer adapt to resistance, structural collapse isn't just a possibility, it is mathematically guaranteed.
Consider how relevant this is for you listening right now. We all know people, or entire companies, living in total denial. They trap themselves in their own echo chambers. They treat any helpful feedback, any constructive criticism, as a vicious personal attack.
Yeah, we see it all the time.
They voluntarily lock the stalks over their own ears, refuse to listen to the warning signs, and just wait blindly until everything falls apart around them.
It is the ultimate tragedy of the unyielding mind. Shutting down the feedback mechanisms doesn't protect you. It merely ensures that when the inevitable break comes, it won't be a manageable cut. It will be a catastrophic failure.
There is an immense amount of actionable insight here. We started with the realization that some structural resistance must simply be crushed to restore vital flow. But it requires the transparent discipline of a courtroom, not the rage of a bar fight.
Right. And then we navigated the internal process. Actively stopping boundary crossings early, making clean cuts on low-resistance habits, and finding the resolve to endure the toxic leakage when confronting deep-seated poison problems.
Then we scaled up. We learned how enduring a standoff against the bone allows us to extract the metal arrow of objective rules. And ultimately, we saw how the golden light of pure transparency starves an obstacle of the secrecy it needs to survive, dissolving it without a fight. All while remembering the fatal warning. Keep your ears open to feedback, or the entire system collapses.
It really is a profound pragmatic roadmap for navigating the inevitable friction of life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want you to reflect on your own environment for a moment. What is that piece of tough meat you have been actively avoiding?
Mm.
Is there a difficult conversation you are dodging, a toxic habit you are ignoring, or a boundary you refuse to enforce because you are afraid of the messy leakage? Are you calibrating your force to bite through it, or are you just letting the blockage sit there, hoping it miraculously clears itself?
Building on that, the source text offers one final vital nuance. Biting through is a necessary mechanical process, but it is not meant to be a permanent state of existence.
Right, you can't just be biting forever.
Exactly. Once you have ruthlessly crushed the obstacles and cleared the space, brute force loses its utility. The text dictates that immediately following Shi Ke after the biting through, there must come a phase of softer aesthetic harmony. The very next hexagram is B, which represents decoration, grace, and beauty.
You do the hard, grueling work of demolition for one specific reason, so you can actually build something beautiful in its place. So I will leave you with this final thought. Once you have utilized the surgical light and the internal drive to bite through the toxic obstacles in your life and the debris is finally cleared away, what kind of beauty will you choose to plant in that empty space?